Alright guys, this is the second Mercy Tips video. In this one, I'll go over Valkyrie and Resurrect, give you some tips and a little insight into how I make the decisions I do. Just like the first one, if anything needs to be explained more, ask me in the comments, and I'll do the best I can to let you know. Enjoy, and hopefully it's good enough for you guys. Alright, first I'm going to go over Valkyrie. Unlike Mercy's old Mass Resurrect ult, Valkyrie's effects aren't immediately obvious. This can make it tricky to use effectively because you're going to use it at times and feel like you got little to nothing out of it. It's just one of those types of ults. One of the ways you can try and get a lot from Valkyrie is by looking at your own team's ults. Like, let's say your team has 4 or 5 ults. In those situations, I tend to hold on to Valkyrie with the upcoming team fight because there's about a 99% chance your teammates are going to use every single ult they have. So if you save it for a fight, for the next fight after those ults are used, your team will have Valkyrie's healing and damage boost to help try and win the following fight. Another thing that I do is there's a few enemy ults that I'll keep track of. I'll go over them later so that you can work on at least keeping track of those enemies, because you do have to look at what your enemy team has and what you have to get a lot out of this ult. But before all of that, I do want to go over how I use Valkyrie differently on attack and defense. This clip here shows me on first point defense on Numbani. And it shows I don't use Valkyrie until they're pushing my team, because you want to get the most out of it, and if your teammate or if your enemies are smart enough, they will just not go forward and not engage your team if Valkyrie is active. So if you wait for the enemies to come forward first and engage your team in the fight and then use Valkyrie, you'll be able to supply your teammates with healing and damage boost during the team fight that's going on. On attack, I tend to use Valkyrie when my team is engaging. And most often, I won't ult on attack unless we already have a pick. And it's the same as how I mentioned the enemy team will back off. There are times where I have popped Valkyrie on the immediate engage instead of when we get a pick, and my team we don't do anything because the enemy won't engage us. Another option is that the enemy team will ult your team while you're Valking, or they can honestly just kill your team during the fight. Either way, you've wasted Valkyrie because either you die or your team dies and you're gonna get nothing from it. I will also use Valkyrie if multiple members of my team are either critical or low, because it saves me the hassle of trying to manage multiple critical health teammates during a fight, which honestly gives them a better chance of staying alive because there is that constant stream of healing on them. I would also advise to use Valkyrie during overtime, because honestly it's overtime. I feel that it's a lot better to use your ult on overtime and have wasted it than to die with the ult when your team needs it there. While you're in Valkyrie, be sure to look at your entire team's health. Like, I know it'll have you latched onto one person, but you're in the air, you're flying above them, you'll want to keep an eye on all of them, so that if one of them is low, you can be on healing, and if they're all healthy, and you don't see any reason to heal, that's when you can switch to damage boost. Because managing damage boost and healing is a big part of Valkyrie. Like, for me in general, I switch between heals and damage boost every couple seconds while in Valk, unless someone is low. Like, if it's obvious, I need healing because this teammate has low health, I'll be boosting them and switching back and forth just to keep it at this easy rhythm of healing and boosting. Along the lines of healing and damage boost management in Valkyrie, let's say you have Lucio as your second healer. If you're in the middle of Valking and he drops beat for whatever reason, you can immediately switch to damage boost because your team will have those extra shields from him. It's the same thing with Zenyatta. He's got that heavy boost to healing, so you won't have to worry about healing your team. You can just boost their damage. For Rally, I would advise letting the armor build for a couple seconds before switching to damage boost, because that armor isn't instant, it takes a bit to build up. But once they have enough of it, like 50 or 75 ticks of armor, that's when you can switch to boost. And you can honestly just keep boosting him through the end of your Valkyrie after Rally's applied, because that armor can take a while for an enemy to tick down. Next, I just have a few more general tips that you can keep in mind about Valkyrie. Like, I would never just fly straight up in Valkyrie. You want to keep moving, like fly between your teammates, fly behind cover, like right just in cover. You'll want to keep moving because even in Valkyrie, Mercy's not invincible. She just has that immediate regen no matter if she's taking damage. People can kill you and they will attack a Valkyrie Mercy. If you keep the Guardian Angel quick and just try and move around in unpredictable ways, they'll have a much harder time of killing you. You also can use Valk to stall or contest a point. I'll do it often. All you have to do is hover above a point or a payload while you're in Valk if none of your enemies are on it, and it will count as contesting. You'll just have to watch the little contested line underneath, and that'll tell you if you're close enough to it or not. You can do this on both attack and defense. I'll use the stalling Valk tactic on control maps, because you can just fly around the point and keep it contested and keep your team getting percentage until as high as you can get it to go. I did mention before the ults that you'll want to try and keep track of. Something I picked up from another Mercy video was that every 2 to 3 team fights, an enemy Zarya will likely have Grav. And you'll want to wait until the enemy Zarya uses her Graviton before you pop Valkyrie. Valk will not do anything against the Grav unless you're really lucky. It's not one of those kinds of ults. You also want to keep track if your enemy team has a McCree or a soldier. Their ults can basically kill you instantly if you're too high to get to ground. So you'll generally either want to wait for those two ults to go out, or you'll want to pop Valk and immediately stay behind a wall. All you have to do is keep one member of your team in view, and that chain healing and damage boost will connect all the other ones that are nearby. I did mention the other healers before, but you'll want to let a Zenyatta and a Lucio, if you have them, you will want them to ult in the Graviton or for Dragon Blade, things like that. Valkyrie tends to get more out of team fights than it will for an individual ult. Alright. One last thing though, if you've ever looked at a fight after a teammate dies and wonder, do I ult this? This is usually how I judge it. If my team is reliably getting kills to this fight, or if I lost a tank or a DPS. Because sometimes, you can manage on your own with the heals without Valkyrie, but if it gets too intense and you think your team can survive this team fight, it'll be up to you, but in those cases, if you think they can survive and that the Valkyrie will help you heal them and keep them alive, use it. It's better to use it than to hold on to it forever. Now, a lot of these clips that are playing right now show me using my pistol in Valkyrie, and while that is an asset because it is a part of her ult is the unlimited ammo, just keep in mind that you're a healer first and not a DPS. You can kill targets in Valkyrie, and I do it often, but it is not your sole purpose. Your main priority will always be keeping your team alive. But while I'm in Valk, I tend to focus down low health enemies that my team is calling, or my personal favorite targets are enemy Pharahs, because they think they're just invincible in the sky, and snipers like an Ana and a Widow. I don't mess with Hanzos. That Stormbow is violent and will melt you. Just stay away from him. If those last two are distracted, the Ana and the Widows, that's normally when I attack them. Because an Ana can take you out in 2 or 3 hits, depending on how many or how much health you've already lost before that damage over time kicks in from her bullets. You'll also want to try and keep in mind, can you just basically like blindside a Widow who's scoped in? If you can, and you're fast enough and accurate enough with your shots, she'll die before she realizes that you're attacking her, or she'll be pushed away from you. Alright. So now we're on to Resurrect. It can be dangerous for Mercy, because she has that cast time and the speed reduction. You're gonna want to keep those in mind every time you do these, because I do not think those nerfs are going anywhere anytime soon. You'll be basically stuck where you are for 2 seconds. She can move, but it's very slight, and there will be times where enemies find you that you did not see, and they will kill you. You're not going to res everyone, and you're not going to survive every res you try to do. Just my first piece of advice, always try to res in cover. You'll want to be behind walls or around corners, behind a Rein shield, or even a Brigida's shield if she stands in front of you can help you get a res. Zarya's bubbles can help if you ask for one. You'll have to try and time the bubble for when you start to res to get the most out of it, but it can help you survive. If a monkey drops a bubble on top of a dead teammate, you can use Winston's bubbles that way. It's all these little types of things that you just have to think about with your team in mind. And if you don't know how to res around a corner, you'll have seen me do it in videos, and there might be a clip of it in here. You can start, if you look at the dead teammate's soul, press the button and then immediately turn Mercy around the corner. She will cast that res from around that corner, and you'll be safe and the teammate will be back. Take advantage of it. It works in a lot of situations. So you don't want to res out into the open, because generally Mercy will die. There's about a 95% chance that if you're in the open when a team fight is going on, or if an enemy is out, they will kill you. So that cover is super important. Don't res behind your enemies. Like, let's say you've got a DPS on your team who has flanked the enemy team and died. They're on their own back there. You don't fly back there, because they're going to get you killed as well, and then your team is down 2 people instead of just 1. This clip here shows what happens if you're in open, by the way, because I nearly die for this. You don't want to do that. If something is risky and puts you at danger, it's best to just not do it, because it's a lot better for a Mercy to err on the side of caution with her reses than to nearly die for them over and over again. I will say that when you have an allied support ult go off, like a Lucio beat and Zenyatta's Transcendence, you can pull off risky reses the instant those ults come out. With Brigida's Rally, I would wait for at least until you have 50 armor to try and get a res. It will help you survive a lot, but you have to wait for it to accumulate. These are the only situations where I would suggest trying to pull off any kind of risky res in the middle of a team fight, is when these ults are there to help you survive. You will want to wait for enemies to leave a corpse, because they will spawn, or they will camp that res. Like, for this res on Zarya that clip just showed, I had to wait for the D.Va to back off before I could get it done. So in some cases, you will have to wait a few seconds before you res someone. There is a few seconds there to bring them back, and sometimes it's just a lot better to wait than to res them immediately. Then there's resing during Valkyrie. You can res by hovering directly above a soul in Valkyrie. A lot of enemies won't look directly up because they're not used to that. When a Mercy reses in a fight, you don't usually stare straight up. You try to find her along, like, the ground somewhere. You can also dive to a soul that's far away, get the res off, and get away. It is risky to your teammate who may die before they get back, and it can still be risky to Mercy because, like I said during the Valkyrie section of this video, you're not invincible in Valkyrie. Even when rezzing, you'll have to keep that in mind. You're not invincible. I would also advise not to go and try and recommend anyone behind the enemy team or near enemy fire while in Valkyrie unless you are confident that you can pull this off. I know there's a lot of cases where I can do it, but it took loads of attempts and a lot of practice with positioning and everything to get to that point where I knew I could get these reses. I'd say at the very most, if you want to practice this, do it in quick play before you try it in competitive. You may have seen me in videos of my gameplay footage doing rezzing someone while slow falling. It is something you can do. Like, if you use the little Guardian Angel jump thing and start your res when you're above their soul, you can activate the slow fall after you fall down below it, below the edge that they're on. This way you'll be rezzing underneath a ledge and it'll keep you in cover from a lot of enemy fire that's coming to come at you. It's one of my favorite things to do, but it is something else that you're going to have to practice. And another thing that I would suggest practicing and getting used to in quick play before you try it in competitive. Other than that, the last thing I have to cover for Resurrect is the issue of who to res when multiple targets are down. You'll have to address, first of all, will this res help? Like, if you're in a team fight and you have multiple targets down, you'll have to ask yourself, if I res one of these targets, will the rest of my team live? First of all, because that's a really big issue. You don't want, like, 2 or 3 of your remaining team members to die just because you're over here trying to get a res off. Other than that, you'll want to know, like, if you res one more person, will your team have a chance of winning this team fight? Because there are a lot of losing team fights where you'll be tempted to res someone to keep it going, but if you're still going to lose that fight, there's no point. Resurrect has a really long cooldown, and you don't have to use it every time it's available. If you are going to use it when you have multiple team members down, it's always up to your judgment who you res, but I have a few things that I tend to do. Like, primarily, I will prioritize my second healer over almost everyone else. Unless I know for a fact that I can solo heal what's happening. If I'm confident in that ability, I'll res a tank or a DPS with an ult over a healer. Especially if that healer is Lucio, because he is the fastest one and can get back quickly. Other than that, I'd say, like, let's say you've got 2 tanks down or a tank and a DPS. I'll take the tank over the DPS because tanks absorb so much more damage for your team and have ways to protect you. But if both tanks are down, I'll choose my main tank, Reinhardt or Orisa, because they have that shield. And that shield will protect your team along with the tanks, just huge amount of health. With 2 DPS are down, one of the things I tend to look at is which one has their ult. Like, if I have a Genji and a soldier, and the Genji has his ult, he'll be rezzed over the soldier for that ult. But the other thing I like to consider with my DPS is, first of all, which one is closer to you? Because if my Genji with an ult is dead on the other side of the map, but Soldier's closer, I'm rezzing Soldier anyway, just because he's right there, and I don't have to go throw myself into danger. The other thing is, in this situation, is Genji killing more or is Soldier? Because if my Soldier is reliably killing more than my other DPS, even if he doesn't have his ult and the other one does, I will res him just because I trust that he will get more kills than this other player will. Along with that, it's, like I said, basically just up to your judgment. You have to make these choices. You are the one playing Mercy. The more you play her and try these things and practice them and think about all these different parts of the match that are going on, it'll get easier for you to make those split-second decisions of who should I res right now. That's all I have on both of these. But if there's anything about Valkyrie or rezzing that you want me to talk more on, let me know. I'll try to give you answers in the comments, or if it's just like you want extra help with certain situations, ask me and I'll look about making shorter videos for it. Other than that, this is all I have for this one, and the next one will be primarily on positioning with an emphasis on what I've covered so far in these two videos. Thank you guys for watching, because honestly, like, if you weren't here to watch these and encourage me, I wouldn't bother to do this at all.